rainy day back in June of 1815. The fate of an entire continent is hanging in the balance, all coming down to what happens on a muddy field in modern-day Belgium. We're talking, of course, about the Battle of Waterloo. This was way more than just a battle. It was a clash of titans that didn't just end a career, it ended an era and completely redrew the map of Europe for the next 100 years.
You know, this battle was so final, so completely decisive, that it literally gave us a phrase we still use all the time: to meet one's Waterloo, right? It means you've hit that final, crushing defeat you just can't come back from. And the origin story for that phrase? It all goes back to this one single world-changing day.
So, on June 18th, 1815, the legendary Napoleon Bonaparte met his end. But that's the end of the story, right? The real question is, how? How does one single battle become the thing that brings down an entire empire? What were those critical moments, those tiny hinges that swung history's door shut on Napoleon? Well, that's exactly what we're going to dig into. To really get Waterloo, we've got to rewind a few months. Napoleon had just escaped from exile on the island of Elba. Can you believe it? He lands back in France, rallies an army, and for this incredible period we call the 100 Days, he's the emperor again. The rest of Europe, they are absolutely terrified. They declare him an outlaw and pull together this massive seventh coalition with one mission: stop him, once and for all.
Okay, just look at the raw numbers here for a second. Napoleon, he manages to pull together about 73,000 men. Pretty impressive, right? But look at who he's up against. You've got two armies, one led by the Duke of Wellington for the British and their allies, and another by the fiery Prussian Gebhard von Blücher. Put them together, and you're looking at around 118,000 troops. Napoleon was massively outnumbered. He absolutely knew, without a doubt, that his only shot at winning was to make sure he never, ever had to fight both of them at once.
So his whole plan was about aggression. Attack and attack first. It was classic Napoleon, really. Totally audacious, but brilliant. He was going to drive his army like a wedge right between the two Allied forces there in Belgium. The idea was to hit the Prussians hard, knock them out of the fight completely, and then turn his full strength on Wellington's army and crush it. This was his signature move, what military folks called defeat in detail. Use speed to beat bigger armies one piece at a time. It was a huge gamble, but it was his only chance. And that all leads us to the battle itself. The Duke of Wellington would later say it was the nearest run thing you ever saw in your life. And he was not kidding. For hours and hours, it was just this brutal, bloody, back-and-forth fight that honestly could have gone either way. Things kicked off on Wellington's right flank, at this big, fortified farmhouse called Hougoumont. Now, the French attack was supposed to be just a diversion, to draw troops away from the center. But it blew up into this savage, all-day battle within the battle that just sucked in thousands and thousands of men from both sides. For Wellington, holding that farmhouse was non-negotiable. It was the anchor of his entire line. 9,000. Just let that number sink in. That's roughly how many French cavalrymen Napoleon's top general, Marshal Ney, launched at the Allied center that afternoon. I mean, it was this thundering wave of steel and horseflesh, armored cuirassiers, lancers, the whole shebang, all meant to just punch right through Wellington's line and shatter it. But Wellington had an answer for it. His infantry formed up into these incredible defensive squares. Think of them as these hollow boxes of soldiers, 4 ranks deep, presenting a wall of bayonets on every side. A horse just will not charge into a wall of sharp steel. And for hours, these incredibly disciplined squares just stood there, taking it and repelling charge after charge after charge. It's one of the most famous images from the entire era. So, the squares held off the cavalry, but the constant French attacks, artillery, infantry, you name it, were stretching the Allied line to its absolute breaking point. And late in the afternoon, it happened. Napoleon found a weakness. This was the moment of crisis. The defenders of another key farmhouse, La Haye Sainte, smack in the center of Wellington's line, had run out of ammunition. It was a disaster. The farm fell to the French. Suddenly, Napoleon's got a foothold right in the heart of the Allied position. He could move his cannons up and just pound Wellington's troops at point-blank range, tearing these massive holes in his crumbling line. Can you even imagine? Wellington himself is right there in the thick of it, inside one of these squares, watching his army get hammered, just waiting for the help he was promised. And he put the sheer agony of that moment into words himself, saying it felt like both his watch and the approaching army had stuck fast. Time had just stopped. It's an incredible quote. But then, on the horizon, something changes. Just as Wellington's army is on the very edge of collapse, help finally shows up. The tide was about to turn, and turn hard. And that was the game changer. The Prussians arrive. See, Napoleon had actually beaten Field Marshal Blucher's army just 2 days earlier, but, and this is so crucial, he hadn't destroyed them. That 72-year-old Blucher, through pure grit, rallied his men and force-marched them across the muddy countryside to get to Waterloo. Their arrival changed absolutely everything.
The Prussians didn't just show up to help Wellington hold the line. They went on the attack. They slammed right into Napoleon's right flank, sparking a vicious fight for the village of Plancenoit. This was a huge problem for Napoleon. It threatened his only escape route and forced him to pull his last vital reserves, including his elite young guard, away from the main fight just to stop his whole army from being surrounded. Suddenly, he's fighting a war on 2 fronts.
All this pressure on his flank, his main attack stalling out, it forced Napoleon's hand. He was out of options. It was time for the final, desperate roll of the dice.
He sent in the Imperial Guard. I mean, these guys were legends, the elite of the elite, the best soldiers in the entire army, and they had never, ever been defeated in a head-on battle. This was it. He sent them marching up that muddy slope for one last, titanic effort to finally break Wellington's exhausted center. Everything was riding on this one attack. But here's the thing, as the guard gets to the top of that ridge, a line of British foot guards who'd been lying down in the mud to hide from artillery, they just stand up. And they unleash a catastrophic volley at point-blank range. And then, the unthinkable happens. The Imperial Guard, the undefeated guard, they actually stop. They waver. And then they break. That's when the cry rips through the French army. La garde recule. The guard is retreating. And that was it. The psychological shock was so immense, it just shattered the army's morale. Total panic. Every man for himself. And just like that, the battle was over. But the shockwaves were just getting started. Waterloo wasn't just the end of a battle. It was the end of one of the most chaotic and transformative periods in all of European history. The human cost, though, was just breathtaking. When you add it all up across all 3 armies, something like 48,000 men were killed or wounded, all in a single day on a tiny patch of land only a few square miles wide. It's almost impossible to comprehend.
For Napoleon, this was the end. No more comebacks. 4 days later, he abdicated for the second and final time. He was exiled to the tiny, remote island of St. Helena in the middle of nowhere, and that's where he died.